So my husband, Chris, had 12 inches of intestine removed just 2 days after college graduation. Crohn's disease. We worried about our 4 kids since before they were born, right? That they would inherit that lovely little gift. But it still took me 10 years to really start getting it right to protect them. You see, when my oldest Paul was 10, I sent him to school with a chef's knife. Actually, I had to bring it in, school rules. No knives in the backpacks, you know how it goes. He was showing his 4th grade class how to make homemade guacamole for a how-to speech. And I know a lot of you have heard this story before because it's the beginning of why I'm here. So I got to be there in class, and as I watched him thwack the pit out of the avocado with that chef's knife, all the adults in the room went, they thought he was going to cut his fingers off, but I knew he'd been trained well. I had my realization of my own, though. I was like, Katie, what are you doing? You see, I'd been showing people, adults all over the world, how to cook for the last 6 years as a food blogger, and I realized in that moment that homemade guacamole was the only thing Paul knew how to make. And he'd been doing it for 4 years. So somehow I'd forgotten to teach the same skills I was teaching as a blogger to the most important people in my life, right? Paul, his sister Leah, John, and little Gabe. Chris and I knew that we couldn't change our kids' genes to protect them from Crohn's disease, but we could choose their diet and we could give them the capacity to do it for themselves. And that was the day I became a kids cooking teacher. It wasn't like that way from the beginning. I mean, like most of you, I wasn't raised on real food. I grew up eating hillbilly bread. I can't believe it's not butter. Remember the squirty stuff? And my mom's homemade spaghetti sauce started with 2 cans of Campbell's tomato soup. So I wasn't really taught to cook as a kid myself. So I get it, you know, like all those parents gasped that day because like too many of us, they're sneaking the steak knives away from their kids at Outback. The other 4th graders probably couldn't even cut an apple. And that, my friends, is the food crisis in America. That's what we're here to talk about. Because as good as natural health and the community and the people here are, we're getting so good at finding root cause, but we have to go deeper. I call it the root of the root cause, and it's the habits our kids are forming in childhood, right? We know that on the same standard American diet that the adults who are on so many prescriptions are on now, if our kids eat that same standard American diet, they're headed in the same terrifying direction. And the statistics are already alarming enough. In just the past 10 years, we've seen type 2 diabetes increase 30% in children in the last 10 years. Right now, 1 in 3 high school students are obese or overweight. That's terrifying. And depression, which research is showing if mental health issues start in childhood, they're almost sure to continue and be a huge problem for these children into adulthood. Depression is up 40% in the last 10 years. And kids, you guys, depression. Kids should be worrying about like getting their homework in on time, not having a mental illness. It's startling. So if we as a culture, and we're starting to believe food is medicine. If we believe food is medicine, we have to stop waiting for a diagnosis before we do something about it. And that is what I told a couple hundred practitioners a few weeks ago in my big talk from a big stage, and I challenged them to do something very specific to get to that root of the root cause in their practices. I'm bringing the same to you today in this edition of the Healthy Parenting Connector. I'm Katie Kimball, founder of Kids Cook Real Food, and we are jumping right in. You don't care what my weather is or what I did today. I don't have to waste your time with that stuff, right? We need to get to the root of the root cause and honestly protect our children from being on the wrong end of those statistics. I want my kids to be way on this end, right? No mental health, no obesity, no diabetes, no diseases of civilization in childhood or 20 years from now or 40 years from now, right? I want my kids to be enjoying their lives and using the gifts God has given them to serve the world and make the world a better place and not spending all their time in doctor's offices and juggling prescriptions. Okay, it's ridiculous that is literally the projection for this young generation, right? I know you've all read that the generation of our kids now is the first generation projected to not outlive their parents. The life expectancy will actually go down. Okay, and that's not because medicine is not figuring out how to keep us alive. It's because we are causing so many problems. And what is that root of all the root causes? It's our kids' diets. And I firmly, firmly believe that getting kids in the kitchen is the best way to help them eat better, and teaching them to cook has so many other benefits. So today we're going to talk about 3 of those. And again, this is what I challenge those practitioners to integrate into their practices. And I'm sending out, I have brochures, well, they're on the floor because organization's not my skill, but I have like brochures and addresses stacked up to mail out, you know, cooking class brochures to practitioners in the next week. You can do this in your own home. So 3 reasons why I want you to seriously consider getting your kids in the kitchen. Whether I get to help you or not, I do not care. I want this generation to eat healthy, to be healthy, and that starts by getting involved with their food. Okay, so first, at Kids Cook Real Food, we talk about connection, confidence, and creativity as being the 3 C's, these amazing benefits that we've learned over the years that came from teaching kids to cook, right? I didn't start out seeking connection, confidence, and creativity. I started out like I needed some help. I was floundering in the kitchen in my life. I didn't have time to do everything. And I knew I wanted my kids to grow up to be adults and have life skills, right? So I'm like, I got to teach them to cook. That moment, that thwack of the knife and the avocado, I was like, oh my gosh, that's the only thing I've taught him. And it was because the school made me do it. That's not how I want to live my life. Okay, so I started out with just that primary goal of life skills. As we watched thousands of families teach their kids to cook, my team and I realized that connection, confidence, and creativity are these incredible benefits that come from teaching kids to cook. So those are structured around the 3 reasons, okay? So first we're going to talk about prevention of chronic disease using diet and how confidence plays a role in that. We're going to talk about why getting kids involved in the kitchen can get the whole family healthier, which is all about that strong connection. And third, about how getting kids involved in the kitchen and empowering them to know how to cook for themselves is really what lays the foundation for healthy eating as adults, and how creativity plays a role in that. Okay, so we'll jump right in. Number 1, first of all, and again, this is what I told those practitioners. If we believe food is medicine, we have to stop waiting for a diagnosis to do something about it, right? I don't want your kids to have a diagnosis. I don't want them to have a chronic disease or a mental illness or anything on their chart other than, you know, looks good, see me back for the next well child checkup. So do we really want to wait until something happens to go, oh, what's the root cause? Oh, the root cause is our diet. The root cause is some unfounded allergy that we didn't know was there. You know, the root cause is these bad eating habits that our kids have, that they're overeating and they're eating the wrong foods. Okay, like I just told you what the root cause is. If you look at what your kids are eating and it's not packed with whole foods, you know, clean eating, vegetables, meats that are well sourced, grains that you have thought through and you've looked and kind of observed your kids' diets to try to figure out if there are any underlying allergies. By the way, expert coming on that in the next couple of weeks here in the Healthy Parenting Connector. So if you have any like niggling thought in the back of your mind, like, oh, I wonder if my kid has a food sensitivity, or if your kids have any skin issues of any kind, or like a constant nasal drip, these are all signs of a potential food sensitivity. Watch that one with Dr. Sheila Kilbane. She is amazing. But here's the thing. I don't want you to wait until your kid has some sort of diagnosis on their chart to figure out how to feed them well. Okay, so if you can change your family's diet now as a preventative measure and get those kids in the kitchen, you're going to prevent it, right? That's the best medicine ever, is not having anything go wrong. Okay, and why are we just getting kids in, why we're getting kids in the kitchen rather than just, you know, serving them good food at the table? Because statistically, getting them in the kitchen is what's going to make them more likely to eat the good food. Okay, when kids are involved with food, they're much more likely to eat it. Research has shown this. The way the science works is that we all sort of have a threshold at which we will accept, like our bodies will accept certain tastes. Okay, so like a very picky eater might need 200 exposures to broccoli in order for them to eat the broccoli. Okay, and you may have heard me say this before. I say it a lot because it's true. So what's really cool and like the superpower that I've just given you is that every exposure to food counts. So if you can get those kids in the kitchen, cutting up the broccoli and serving the broccoli, you're going to fill that exposure bucket much faster and get them more likely to eat it. Plus, when kids are invested in something, especially if they're like, it's not a physical thing that's causing them to not want to eat new foods, but more of a psychological thing, just I don't want to eat that. Like kids are like that. Some adults are like that. When you're invested in the process, when you have made it with your own hands, you're much more likely psychologically to want to see that through to the end, to close that loop that's been opened in your brain and actually taste it, right? So, and we've found in our classes, you know, we give little surveys to members, and a lot of people come in already eating good diets, a third of our members come in already experiencing food allergies or food sensitivities because they're like, uh-oh, now we have to teach our kids to cook so they can survive healthily and get through life. But of like all of those people, a solid quarter have seen their kids try things that they never thought their kids would try because of their involvement in the kitchen. Now, I know 25% is not a huge number, but remember, a bunch of that other 75%, they were already good eaters, right? So that's actually a pretty awesome statistic, and that's what I want to see for you, and that's what you will see when you get your kids involved in the kitchen. Okay, so first, we want to think about prevention using diet, not waiting for a diagnosis before we clean up the foods our kids are eating. That works better when we get kids in the kitchen. And bonus, when your kids have these real life skills and they can both feed themselves and feed other people, they know they're doing something really good and authentic and contributing to the world. Guess what that does to their confidence? Okay, compare that to the participation medal that they got for soccer and the snack that they get every time and the reward they get at church just for showing up. Which side do you think is causing the self-esteem crisis in the world as we try to fix the self-esteem crisis in our kids? And which side is going to give them authentic self-esteem and self-confidence? It's learning real skills. Okay, so that confidence in the kitchen helps foster the prevention as with food as medicine. Number two, we got to talk about why getting kids in the kitchen gets the whole family healthier. Okay, there's all sorts of great statistics on family dinners. Starting at just 2 dinners a week, 2 times eating dinner as a family a week, we know that that helps reduce drug and alcohol abuse, depression and suicide in teens, and increases their academics, like their academic success, even more than time spent in school and time spent on homework. Okay, so if the kids are involved in the kitchen, certainly then you're sitting down to eat those family dinners, just continuing that rolling. We also know that if a child has just one strong bond with an adult, it can be you, it can be someone else, but you're there in their lives, why not you and someone else, right? They can have a strong bond with you. They are so much less likely, again, to fall into depression and suicidal thoughts. Did you know that suicide is the second leading cause of death for kids ages, I think it's 10 to 19 or 10 to 24. Not that that matters too much. Second only to accidents. So those of us who put helmets on our kids, who buckle them into cars, who worry that they won't cross the road correctly, who say, hey, get down from there, I don't want you to fall on your head, doggone it, you better be having some suicide prevention in your house as well. And the best suicide prevention is connecting as a family. Think about memories you have of connecting as a family. It's almost always around food. It's around making those family recipes. It's around enjoying time in the kitchen together. It's around eating food, right? Food brings people together. No one is going to argue, about that point. So why not use that healthy food and use it to bring your family together and connect, form those connections. The whole family is healthier in body, mind, and spirit that way. Awesome, right? So again, why are we teaching our kids to cook? 1, prevention of disease using diet and building, which builds their confidence, extra bonus. 2, getting the whole family healthier, body, mind, and spirit by those strong connections formed both by working in the kitchen together and by sharing family dinners. And then number 3, I think all of us know in our heart of hearts, we may not think of it every day in like the nitty gritty throes of parenting when you're like, oh, my kid just peed on the floor and I have to feed them lunch and I forgot to plan dinner and I got to thaw some meat and oh my gosh, look at Mount Laundry. Like we get bogged down with that stuff. So we don't think about it every day, but we all want to raise healthy, competent, independent adults, right? Who we're super proud to send off into the world. So how are we going to do that? It's not by waiting until they're 18 to give them skills and just hope that they'll somehow absorb our work ethic as we work hand over hand to feed them and serve them every day. No, it's by giving them skills as early as possible and giving them opportunities to practice that responsibility, right? So if we want to raise healthy, independent adults, there's no better time than now. And I'm speaking to you whether your child is 2 or 6 or 10 or 17. If you haven't done it yet, oh my gosh, there's no better time than now. Even if your child's 12 months, family responsibility and just doing little things according to their age and their developmental skill is absolutely part of being a good parent. I had a person last week, I posted pictures on Instagram of my kids cooking pancakes. My 8-year-old is kind of like learning the skills a little better, and my 11-year-old's really expert at it, so she was helping him, and I was all proud of them. And someone on Instagram was like, well, I hope that's not his responsibility all the time now, because that is not what kids should be doing. That's not their responsibility, that's yours. Comments continued, got a little nasty. I was called a lazy parent because my kids were cooking. Holy cow, is that anti what I believe? And that's fine, that's cute. You're welcome to call me a lazy parent. You're not going to hurt my feelings, but you're also wrong, because it's really, really difficult. It's actually more difficult to teach children a skill and to delegate that and to make sure they're doing it right and continue to, remind them that it's their responsibility for a while until they grow into their own. Way harder on the upfront side to do that than just to do it myself. So I'm definitely not lazy. I have big goals. I want my kids to be able to lean into their zone of genius when they're young adults, when they're in college, when they're just out of college. I don't want them to be like, oh man, Mom, I don't know how to cook such and such. Can you tell me? And Googling everything and taking adulting classes. No, heck no. I think that they were created to change the world. Okay. And they can't change the world if they're trying to figure out how to survive, or if they're spending time in doctor's offices trying to figure out why they feel fatigued, why their hair is falling out, and why their cycles are all messed up for my daughter. Okay, young adults are dealing with this stuff. I don't want my kids to deal with that stuff. I want them to change the world. I want them to make a difference. And if that means, 20 minutes less time playing outside or playing a video game in my house when they're 8 and when they're 11 and when they're 14 because they're helping the family, well, statistics and Katie Kimball both say that that's the better choice. So that is why I'm teaching my kids to cook. It's one of the many reasons I encourage you to teach your kids to cook, because we've got to lay that foundation and get them trained up to be adults who are inspiring and contributing to the world instead of, again, just kind of figuring out how to feed themselves. Now, our last C is creativity. How does creativity play into all of this? Well, as the kids get more competent in the kitchen, they're able to infuse their creativity into it. So first of all, creativity kind of has two definitions, right? First, you're literally creating with your hands. When you're making a recipe, even if you just follow it verbatim, you're creating something with your hands, which I believe has more value than creating a building in Mindshare by tapping a screen. Even though there is some value there, it's different. It's different to create with your hands, and there's a certain sense of accomplishment there. Plus, supercharge that creativity. And once kids understand how recipes come together, they can start tweaking them. They can start making up their own recipes. And this is so good for their executive function, you guys. Teachers and experts tell us that in this digital age, creativity and executive function are sorely lacking in our children. And so what better way to take something that has to be done anyway, feed the family, and allow them to build that creativity, okay? We know that 80% of the jobs are first graders, right now, first graders entering into first grade right now, 80% of the jobs they'll have as adults don't even exist yet. How do we prepare them for that? We help them be confident. We help them be connected to others. We help them have creativity so that they can solve problems that don't exist yet, right? And we help them have a sense of self, so that they feel able to tackle problems that don't exist yet. That's what parents are for. That's what we are here for, is to build those skills in our kids so that they can be healthy, independent, competent adults. Amen? Oh, so good, so good. All right, so we at Kids Cook Real Food build connection, confidence, and creativity in kids by teaching them to cook. I'm happy to be on your team. I'd love to make it really easy for you so that you don't have to do all the thinking. You just get in the kitchen and have fun with your kids. But I don't care if you let me help. It's okay if you don't. What I really want is to change the health of this young generation. I do believe food is medicine. And I think it's nuts that we wait for a diagnosis before trying to fix it. So I want to challenge you to work on that confidence in your kids by getting them in the kitchen, because it will prevent future disease if you can start them out with a foundation of good eating and good eating habits, okay, and responsible habits. I want to challenge you to connect strongly with your kids, both in the kitchen and at family dinner table, because that will get them on the right side of the statistics where I want your kids and I want my kids. And finally, I want you to get them in the kitchen to lay that foundation for a healthy adulthood and infuse their creativity into it so they're building their executive function. What? Like, you cannot get any better than that. And I'm so happy to share this with you. 2 weeks ago, like the beginning of my talk today was the beginning of my talk to a couple hundred health practitioners 2 weeks ago. And at that conference, you guys, oh my gosh, the people there are just amazing. They're on fire to change the face of health in this world. And the pediatrics, like I met the greatest kids health champions and world changers, and we all stood together and we swore that like this is the beginning of a revolution. 4 of the 15 speakers that day were on kids health. That was very surprising to many people because usually kids health is ignored, right? Because the biggest problem isn't that kids are so sick yet. The biggest problem is that most of the time nobody's paying attention. So my prayer for the world in the next 5 years, and I do think it will happen, is that we are about to see a revolution. We're about to see people start caring about kids' health. And my prayer is that we can care about it as a preventative measure and not because things have gotten so bad that everyone's getting sick, okay? So change is happening. There's lots of brilliant minds out there fighting for your kids and mine. I feel like I'm one of them. I'm doing the practical stuff and getting the word out there, and I really want to challenge you in the next week, put it in your calendar, get your kids in the kitchen in some way, shape, or form. If you need resources, leave a comment. I've got all sorts of free resources, from free video previews to train your kids to recipes that kids can make, strategies to help you make it simple, okay? Cool. In the next 2 weeks here in this video series, The Healthy Parenting Connector, we will hear from 2 of my favorite natural health practitioners, although I have to be careful saying that because now I'm meeting more and more. I probably shouldn't have favorites. But both of these holistic MDs have been on the Healthy Parenting Connector before. Last time we met Dr. Sheila Kilbane, she talked all about inflammation. This time, I don't know which order they're in, but in the next 2 weeks, Dr. Kilbane will be back talking about discovering hidden food sensitivities. We filmed that interview before we as a family discovered that my daughter is dairy sensitive. Literally, like all hair on my legs just stood up because that's part of our journey. It's part of our journey. So you guys get to see that amazing interview in the next 2 weeks. We also get to have Dr. Elisa Song back. Dr. Song is an incredible holistic MD out in California. Last time we saw her on the Healthy Parenting Connector, she talked about poop. This time we're going to talk about kids' diet. So I guess we sort of did that in reverse order, but it all makes sense. So you're definitely going to want to tune in the next couple of weeks because we're all standing together. We believe that food is medicine. We believe kids' health is important, and how kids eat really makes all the difference. I'm Katie Kimball from Kids Cook Real Food, signing off on this edition of the Healthy Parenting Connector, and I will see you next week.